So we'll just wait for a couple of minutes on this, and then we'll get started. So Michael Leonard is with us. Good. I know that we have some folks that are. Dan Sheehan is in New York at a conference. Robert, our dear friend Robert Gatewood, has COVID. I was thinking he might jump on, but he's probably recovering. Ken Snyder is in Florida, and I'm covering his class today. But Brenda, so good to see you and the gang. Are you at home in Ohio?
No, I'm actually in South Carolina.
Nice.
A little bit warmer.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah. And our friend David Yates is broadcasting from New Mexico, right?
Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Extraordinary. Las Cruces, New
All
Mexico.
that is in space.
There you go. Hi, Michael. Good morning. Good to see you. Good to see you. All right.
Morning.
Yeah, welcome. So let's just kind of go around real quick and we'll get started. And I don't think everybody knows everybody. So just Nagma Khan is Nagma Huevas. Nagma is doing our presentation today. Ken, you want to just say good morning?
Hey, good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back. Several meetings I've been traveling, so I haven't been able to join you. So I'm happy to be here this morning.
Great. And so Ken is our quality person. Ken ran, I met Ken doing work many years ago back at Mazda when we put that plant up, when you put that plant online. So a lot of the things that Ken is talking about really apply in the quality area. So, and Pam is with us this morning. Good morning, Pam.
Good morning.
And so Brenda, let's go say, Brenda, would you say good morning? Say hello there.
Sure. Brenda Roman, and Roger and I met because his daughter was, well, she's still a medical student. Had to graduate in a few months. At Boonshoff School of Medicine in Dayton, where I was the associate dean for medical education. And I have recently retired and started a medical education consulting business.
Great to see you, Brenda. Yeah, Michael.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Leonard. I'm at the University of Rochester, but I am a UB alum for undergraduate medical school residency. Loved it so much I joined the faculty for almost 10 years before I came here. I'm the chief safety officer at our medical center, as well as a professor in pediatrics and public health sciences.
Great. Welcome, Michael. And Pam.
Good morning. So I'm Pam Marcucci. I'm the VP for programs here at the Jacobs Institute, which is a nonprofit medical device innovation center that's directly located above the Gates Vascular Institute Vascular Hospital. And I'm very pleased to be here. I do have to say we have our weekly ops meeting at 8:30, so I'm going to pop out between 8:30 and 8:40. I'm sorry to miss the end, but I will watch the recording.
Great. Welcome, Pam. And I'll be down at the medical school this afternoon covering Ken's class. So anybody that's in the medical school, stop down to the room with that I call with what's the name of it? Is it the active learning room? Is that it, Pam? Is that what it's called? The room with the big projectors that sound like jet engines?
I'm not sure what that one's called.
Okay, yeah. So if you're on the medical campus. So, and of course, we have our good, wonderful Dr. David Yates broadcasting from Las Cruces, New Mexico. So, all right, so Nagma, over to you. The reason why Nagma is here is Nagma is doing some fascinating work with the Foresight inventory, which is a thinking styles, a preference inventory. She's done some work with Dr. Puccio with his Gerard Puccio. This is a two-part series. We're going to have Nagma come in and speak about this first, and then between now and our next meeting that we'll establish. It's usually like about the third Thursday of the month, and I'll get that while Nagma's doing her talk. We'll have you get an opportunity to take the Foresight inventory, take a look at your preferred thinking styles. But Nagma has found some fascinating information about your creative thinking style and burnout. So without further ado, Dr. Nagma Khan, you've read her bio. And so Nagma, thank you so much for being here with us this morning and for sharing your really valuable research. So over to you.
Right. Well, recently graduated from the master's program in creativity and change leadership. Roger was one of my mentors and professors, and I have learned a lot just going through the going through this master's, it's kind of changed and opened up my mind to just different ways of thinking. I served as division director for over 28 years and stepped down about 3 years ago, and I'm more clinical, more education, and getting into this kind of research at this stage. So I'm a research novice, so please bear with me through this, but this has really opened up my mind to see if I can help in any way, both all our medical students, our residents, fellows, and faculty, in hopefully preventing burnout in the future. So my study is the creative mindset of pediatric emergency physicians as a predictor of burnout. This was an exploratory study to see if we could find anything. It was just a thought in my mind as I did my own foresight assessment, and then kind of started noticing all the 60, 70 physicians that work with us and how we practice in emergency medicine. So is there a mindset that makes you more effective in pediatric emergency medicine and feel like you're not burnt out? Hold on, let me move my slide forward, because burnout is a big deal. It's the leading cause of diagnostic errors and, patient and life dissatisfaction. And of course, early attrition. Emergency medicine has by far one of the highest attrition rates. Even in my own division over the 28 years, as I've hired on physicians, I've seen them kind of whittle down their FTE to go down in their FTE to get to a level where they felt like they had good work-life balance. And young physicians straight out of fellowship talking about how they feel burnt out a year out into their profession. 60% of emergency physicians experience burnout. And it's not surprising. I love the term that, Gerard shared with me, Dr. Pucha shared with me, was that we live in a VUCA world. Well, we live in a VUCA environment in the emergency department. Unpredictable, making life-death decisions, thinking on our feet, dealing with those, with interpersonal relationships, not just with the patients, the guardians of our patients, but as well as other physicians in different practices. So it's not surprising that we get burnt out very quickly. Studies have found that there is a correlation between burnout and certain personality traits. If you have a low level of hardiness, or you cope with stress in a passive and defensive way, if you have low self-esteem, or if you have a high level of neuroticism or a type A personality, you're more likely to be burnt out. Now, the good news is that burnout can be assessed. We are all familiar with the Maslow Burnout Index. It can be assessed. And if we find out the cause, then there are interventions available to help improve both our personal wellness, as well as patient safety, satisfaction, and of course, ultimately the quality of care. But the focus on interventions has primarily been on organizational change. We rarely talk about what we can do individually, and that because that was tried and tested in the past, and we found that there was nothing, we couldn't put the focus on the physician to fix their burnout. We had to put changes in our environment to help physicians prevent burnout, for example, with electronic medical record, or bringing in scribes, or decreasing work hours. All of those things have been tried, and really nothing seems to be working at this stage. So burnout can be measured using the Maslow Burnout Inventory. It's a 22-item questionnaire, and it measures burnout in 3 dimensions: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and personal accomplishment. I'm sure you all are familiar with it. I have taken the Maslow Burnout Inventory probably 3 times during my career. And it gives me valid information about my level of burnout. Burnout is not static. It changes over time. I was more burnt out probably halfway through my administrative career than I am now, doing more clinical work and interacting more with students, residents, fellows, as well as with patients. So I feel my level of burnout right now is extremely low. So if you have a high level of emotional exhaustion, where you feel emotionally exhausted coming to work, and just even the idea of coming into work exhausts you. Or if you feel depersonalization, you do not interact, your patients are now not humans, you don't treat them like that. Or if you have a low sense of personal achievement, you're definitely burnt out. You're engaged if you have low emotional exhaustion, low depersonalization, and a high sense of personal accomplishment. And then anything in between is a risk of burnout. So The Maslach burnout inventory is, there is an inventory that's specific. The wording is specific for healthcare professionals, and that's the one we used. Forsyth, of course, is the inventory that you're going to learn more about with Dr. Puccio in the next meeting. But Forsyth is a measure of your preference for problems, for the steps of problem solving. We are all natural problem solvers. We wake up in the morning and we are problem solving from the point we decide what clothes we are going to put on to, what food we're going to eat. So we are doing this constantly in a very intuitive manner without even thinking about it. But the Forsyth thinking profile, which is a scientific measure of thinking preference, defines the problem-solving process as clarifying the problem, thinking of ideas to help resolve the problem, developing the steps involved in the solution of the problem, and then implementing the problem. It's a 36-item questionnaire. It reveals how you naturally approach any kind of challenge that needs critical and creative thinking. More than 80% of us prefer some type of thinking over others. For example, I'm a high ideator implementer. Give me a problem to solve. I won't even question what the problem is. I'll come up with a few ideas and boom, I'm implementing it. And the poor people that reported to me, the 60 physicians that I managed, they were the victims of that, because I would try one thing and then I would go back and say, oh, this didn't work. Let me try it a different way. And that didn't work. But I should have been focusing more on clarifying what the problem was to begin with and developing the steps involved in before I implemented it and said, this didn't work. Let me go talk to this person. So I'm an ideator implementer. If I am put together with somebody who's a high clarifier and developer, I am going to get bored out of my wits because they're going to slow down the process for me. I want to implement something. They are stuck on clarifying the problem. And you'll notice that when you sit in some sort of a team to try to solve a problem, how we're all interacting with each other, rolling our eyes because somebody is stuck on ideating while we've clearly decided we're ready to go and elicit change. So understanding each other's foresight mindset and understanding our team members' foresight mindset really helps us gel together and come up with creative solutions to really complex problems. And we are complex problem solving every day in the trenches. I'm doing that in the ER as I'm managing ED flow, as I'm trying to get a resident to see a patient while I go see another patient, and trying to admit patients or discharge patients and dealing with their discharge instructions. So we are doing this all the time. Understanding our thinking preference helps us become better problem solvers. And we do this all the time anyway. We do it in the way we design research. We do it in the way we define quality. We are planning, doing, studying, and acting. And if we added in kind of the foresight problem-solving process into each step of these, we would become better quality people. And then we do it in clinical care. As we do root cause analysis, we are defining problems, and ultimately we are recommending implementation and solutions. So we are already doing it in healthcare. We are doing it in the practice of medicine. We clarify, we obtain a history, perform a physical exam. We ideate, we come up with a differential diagnosis. We develop, we create a sequential plan of action. And then we implement with our interventions, with the medications, with the surgeries we prescribe. So that's what got me thinking, is it possible that one of the causes of burnout is that there's a mismatch between the way we like to problem solve and the way the environment we work in wants us to problem solve? As an ER physician, if I served as an internist instead of an ER physician and I focused on a broad differential diagnosis, I could have a dead patient on my hand. My job is to look at the signs and symptoms and provide interventions to stabilize the patient and get them to the specialist, who is then going to provide a broad differential and come up with a long-term plan. So my objective was to test the degree to which a pediatric emergency physician's creative problem-solving mindset predicted burnout. And could this be different for different specialties? Absolutely. If an internist was constantly pushed to discharge patients out off the floor and send them home, that would probably be a bigger stressor for them than if they were given the time. And we've been through this. We've been through utilization reviews to say, hey, your patient is ready to go home. You need to discharge your patient, when you as a physician feel that the patient needs to be there a little bit longer. On the other hand, for me to hold a critical patient in the ER for a prolonged period of time, or even a non-critical floor patient for a long period of time, once I provided that initial assessment and management, I'm moving on to the next patient because there's always a next patient in the waiting room. So that's my mindset. So what was our methods? This was an exploratory, prospective, non-experimental, cross-sectional empirical study of pediatric emergency physicians on medical staff. We chose to use one children's health system because all three of our emergency departments have exactly the same processes, nursing policies and guidelines, admission guidelines. All of them are the same, but we have two different practices. We have a private group of about 50 physicians, and we have an academic group of about 50 physicians. So two different practice types, same environment, three hospitals. In voluntary participation, informed consent was obtained. We collected demographic data that we thought could potentially impact burnout: age, sex, gender, the site that they were working, specialty or subspecialty. Obviously, the specialty was pediatric emergency medicine. They had to be board eligible or certified in pediatric emergency medicine. We asked them about their practice model, private or academic, years of experience, their FTE status, so were they working full-time or part-time, percentage of time they spent in clinical time, because we do, even on the private practice side, they have physicians with a lot of protected time to do administrative or academics. And definitely in our practice, that was the case. So percentage clinical time, whether they had any educational debt, how many dependents, and of course their 5-year plan, with the idea to see if they had a 5-year plan of leaving. And then of course, they filled up the demographic data on REDCap, and then they did the Foresight questionnaire on the Foresight website and the MASLAC burnout inventory on MindGarden. And so our results, we invited 88 physicians to participate, and 75 of them completed all three of the surveys. That was an 85.2% return rate, which was amazing. We analyzed the data using descriptive statistics for our demographic data, and then we did linear regression for correlation of the 3 domains of burnout with the 4 domains of foresight. And then we did multivariate regression to overcome the impacts of any confounders. We considered statistical significance for a p-value less than 0.05. Okay, so here's the demographic statistics. Pediatrics tends to be more female-oriented. Our group, the median age was 43, with a range of 39 to 56, interquartile range. 41% males, 59% females, 47% white, 23% Asian, which included South Asian and Southeast Asian, 21% Black or African American, and 9% other. 83% were married, 6.4% divorced, and 10% were single. The median years of practice were 11 years with a range of 6 to 23. And the total hours worked, the median was 40 hours with a range of 30 to 45 hours of total work time. Percentage time spent in clinical was 80% with a range of 60 to 90%. We did a 1-sample t-test to compare our mean scores in the 3 domains of burnout: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and personal achievement, with the population mean that was provided by MASLAC. And the population mean is all healthcare means. So you can see we had a higher level of emotional exhaustion with a significant p-value. Depersonalization was actually about the same and not insignificant p-value. And personal achievement, we had definitely had a much higher sense of personal achievement in the total sample size, which was also statistically significant. And then we started looking at the relationship between our demographic data and the foresight scores, looking at the linear relationship between exhaustion and then these areas. And we found some areas where we had statistical significance. For example, the female gender had 5 point on average, they scored 5.64 points higher than the male gender as far as emotional exhaustion was concerned. So females were more emotionally exhausted than the males. And then, interestingly, current debt, when you're comparing this to people who had no debt, current debt exceeding know that there's been a lot of focus in medicine about getting rid of educational debt somehow. And we have physicians in our practice who finally reached 10 years and are getting rid of their emotional debt. So not surprisingly, emotional debt played a big part. Years of practice incidentally also statistically significant. The more years in practice, the lower the score on emotional exhaustion. So that was also a very interesting finding. So just a number of years in practice didn't necessarily lead to burnout. So something's happening kind of in the first few years of practice, which is causing you to have burnout. And then finally, to the meat. For every 1 unit increase in clarifier score, emotional exhaustion score increased on average by 0.84. So there was a linear relationship between whether you were a clarifier and your emotional exhaustion. Similarly, for every 1 unit increase in developer score on average, the emotional exhaustion score increased by 0.59. So there's a linear correlation between being a high clarifier, high developer, and emotional exhaustion. This was quite significant. We did a multivariate linear relationship as well, adjusting for significant covariables. So this regression 1 was adjusting for years of practice and total hours of a week. And you can see that we replicated the same thing. The clarifier score, emotional exhaustion score goes up by 0.86 for every 1 point increase in clarifier score, and similarly, exactly the same findings for the developer score. Regression 2 basically modulated for gender and educational debt, and we still found the same thing. There was a relationship between being a high clarifier and emotional exhaustion, being a high developer and emotional exhaustion. On the other hand, we didn't find anything associated with depersonalization. So depersonalization showed no correlates, so I haven't even provided that data for you. This is the relationship between personal achievement and foresight, and none of the demographic things paired off for personal achievement. There was no correlation except for the ideator score. High ideators tended to have a higher sense of personal achievement. So that also is a good finding, because ability to generate a lot of ideas around solving a problem, you actually come out ahead and you have more personal achievement. This is something that can be taught. Every single step in foresight, clarifying, ideating, developing, and implementing can be taught using tools. And honestly, we all compensate for this over time. If we are good at what we do, it is because despite having low energy around certain steps of problem solving, we find a way of compensating. We may not like it. We compensate either by delegating or by educating ourselves. So also replicated again in multivariable regression, adjusted for years of practice and total hours of work, we still found that there was a relationship between the ideator score and a sense of personal achievement. So in conclusion, in this cohort of our physicians, the syndrome of burnout was most closely associated with emotional exhaustion. We did not see depersonalization in our pediatric ED physicians. It's tough to depersonalize kids anyway. A clarifying and a developer mindset correlated with emotional exhaustion, while an ideator mindset correlated with higher scores in personal achievement. There was also a negative correlation between years of service and emotional exhaustion. Educational debt more than income correlated with higher scores in emotional exhaustion as well. Implications. So the implications for this is, the field of creative thinking has well-established and empirically proven training techniques. You're sitting with Gerard and David Yates, with Roger and David Yates, and you've already incorporated teaching for your creative teaching for your medical students. So you guys are well ahead of the game. The predictive relationship between creative problem solving preferences and burnout suggests that training in applied creative thinking might be useful in mitigating burnout. And starting early, starting with medical students, residents, and fellows is probably the way to go. Can you reverse this? That's to be studied later. By intervening with physicians who are already burned out, by giving them creative thinking education, hopefully we'll be able to slow down or reverse burnout in physicians. The limitations are obvious. We have a limited sample size, but we did have a great response rate on our physicians. So clearly the physicians bought into this process. The response rate was 85%. While we did a single institution and a single specialty, we used 3 different hospitals. One was inner city, one was private practice, one was academic. And so we wanted to keep it in the same system initially because we didn't want to put in more confounders. But the goal then in the future is to test the generalizability of these results, and have applied for a grant to kind of look more broadly at emergency physicians in different health systems to see if we can reproduce the same thing on emergency physicians before we start looking at other specialties. Because my thoughts are that in different specialties, different mindsets will promote burnout. So while we have clarifier and developer mindsets in emergency medicine, we may have more of a implementer mindset that may be a sense of cause of burnout in, let's say, internal medicine. And then we need to explore further whether creativity training could reverse burnout. So that's my presentation, and I'll open it to questions.
Nagma, thank you so much. It's powerful, powerful stuff there. And so some of you are familiar with the foresight thinking inventory. Some of you have a sample of it from kind of being involved in some of the work that we've done together. I've just put a note in the chat. We'll schedule our next meeting for February 16th. But between now and then, what we'll do is we'll send you out an email, and you'll be able to take the foresight inventory for free. It's usually costs $65, but we're going to give it to you for not a Gerard and the Foresight Company, because of the research implications of this, and because of the findings that Nagma has presented here, which are pretty powerful. We're going to have you go ahead and take it with the possibility that might have some research opportunities there. So with that in mind, let me just have you address any questions to Dr. Khan about thinking preferences, about the study. We found this to be absolutely powerful and fascinating. The biggest predictor is your thinking preference. So over to you. Questions for Dr. Khan, comments, reactions? What do we got?
Dr. Khan, Dr. Khan,
Yes,
can you hear me all right?
I can, absolutely.
Yeah, that was actually very fascinating. As a study of one, as Roger will tell you, I'm an ideator and an implementer, and I don't think that I really suffered from burnout. I loved what I loved what I do. I will still love what I do. So as a study of one, I'm certain supportive. My question is, and you kind of alluded to it, what if you don't have those qualities? Is it something that, and I'll ask you and Roger, is it something that you can change with training, or is it sort of embedded
So,
in your DNA?
it is believed that your thinking preference, your way of problem solving is static. It doesn't change, but you modulate it. And you're successful because you can modulate it. We always have energy around the same place. But I did administration for 25 years. You don't know how many quality initiatives I sat through. And the way we were taught problem solving in the trenches in medicine, they would give us a list of things we couldn't do, but they never directed us appropriately. The biggest thing I experienced in my time as an administrator was that we never deferred judgment. The big thing that you're taught, Robert, as we do this, is we are told every idea is a good idea and a potential idea. It doesn't matter how off the wall it is. But if somebody sitting in a team meeting says, that's a stupid idea, it basically stymies any future ideas. And I've sat through meetings with really, really strong personalities, with a bunch of nurses and physicians and respiratory therapists. But there's one loud-spoken physician in the group who basically promotes their ideas and doesn't let any other idea come forward. The result of that then became that we were always coming up with the same solution to a problem that never got resolved. And I know my weakness. I know that when timelines started getting developed in a meeting, I zoned out, but it needed to be done. So my hope was that somebody else was taking the lead and doing it. And what I realized after, taking foresight and doing this whole master's was I've got to be engaged in it. However bad I feel about it, I got to be engaged. The other interesting thing I found out was if I'm sitting in a team and we all agree on something, it means that we all have the same mindset. So we're all skipping the same part of the process of creative problem solving. You actually want people to say, wait, we haven't even clarified the problem. Why are we already coming with ideas, or why are we already at the solution finding? We need to clarify the problem. And so those people are your friends. When you set up a team, you've got to set up a team of people who think differently. And this process allowed me to see that that's what was important. We basically gravitate to people who think like us. And then we think we're in a comfort zone, but that's completely the wrong place to be. So I've been taken out of my comfort zone by understanding my own way of thinking and recognizing that somebody else needs to help where I am deficient and I don't enjoy it. I'll do it, but I don't enjoy it. So I think that's the important thing to understand. I tried this on my own physicians before I ever did this. As I was going through my master's, I actually had 10 of the leaders in my division take foresight, added in some researchers because I knew they would be critical of this kind of a process. And it was interesting that they did their foresight. I'd met with them one-on-one to kind of go over theirs, and I said, what do you think you are? And you said, oh, definitely an implementer, or definitely I'm a clarifier. And they started recognizing why they were having issues, because they weren't doing the 4 stages of the process, and either they were getting stuck on clarifying, or they were spending their time developing. We have a wonderful quality person in our division, and they are a high clarifier, high developer. So they start off processes and they are stuck in the developing phase, and then you have to push them through to implementation. You got it. It's perfect. Move ahead and implement the process. So there was a lot of insight involved in just understanding what your thought mindset was.
And to build on Dr. Khan, Robert, as you know, you've taken foresight, and Pam, this might be something we might want to incorporate into some of the stuff that you're doing at JI. and like I said, we'll have a chance to do this, but the idea behind knowing what your preference is that yes, you're strong in a particular area, but we have tools to be able to help you become stronger in other areas. And for example, today we're working with Dr. Snyder's residents on problem clarification, that whole clarifying stage of the process. That is not my preference, but you know, I've learned how to do that. So the tools you've learned, the creative problem solving tools you've learned, mediate that or help you to, hey, my preference isn't clarified, but I know the tools to help me to clarify better. So Michael, you have a hand up there. Yeah, go ahead, Robert. Yeah.
Can I just follow up though?
Of course.
You know, Dr. Khan, we experience exactly what you described in meetings. And one thing that helped us is that we took another personality test that kind of, I guess, uncovered the of each of our personality, as far as some of us were very outspoken. Some of us proved to be sort of more reserved and didn't speak up and were more passive. And once we understood our colleagues and why they didn't speak up, or why some were, like you said, sort of, you know, took over the conversation and pushed their agenda. Once everyone realized their own personality, they tended to modify that a bit, and it helped them, each of us, know our own personality and also understand the other colleagues' personalities. And so our communication skills skyrocketed after that. It was really, really helpful. And we were we could, you know, sort of converse, discuss, and come to a solution in a much more civil way. So it's just something else I thought was interesting.
And Robert, your practice actually took foresight. So we did foresight.
We took foresight, and we took this other one as well.
Yeah. So Michael, over to you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you,
no,
Robert.
thanks, Roger. So first, Dr. Khan, thank you. Really fascinating presentation. And Robert, you read my mind. As soon as I saw the foresight slide, I immediately went to, I think what you may be referring to is the DISC assessment, DISC. And there's different variations of that. I'm sure there's plenty out there. We tend to use that one. And in my mind, I'm trying to map my personality types to the foresight descriptions, right? So, you know, I think it would be fascinating to see, is there correlations between the personality types and the foresight categories? You know, I'm thinking, you know, I'm a DC in DISC. So, you know, I wonder, is that dominance, that D, does that correlate with implementation? And I do also have to wonder, how situational is it? Because I would say prior to the pandemic, my certainly my leadership style was different. You know, for the past 3 years, you just had to get things done. We didn't have time to spend, you know, clarifying over and over and over and spending, you know, days or weeks doing development. We had to implement. We had to, you know, we had to get testing sites up. We had to get vaccine clinics up and running. We had to manage our healthcare workforce. So I also have to, even though I think we may tend to gravitate toward different traits and styles, I would be curious, Dr. Khan, your thoughts about how situational this is.
So it is. Obviously, it is. Time is always going to be a constraint. The good thing about following a process is you can actually shorten the time if you follow the 4 steps of the process. I agree with you, Michael. I did DISC as well, and I did foresight. To me, what ended up with foresight was I found out what I was. I was a driver, an ideator, implementer, but I got tools to kind of manage not just what I was good at, but tools for managing the clarifying and the developing phases. With DISC, I understood what my personality was, and I understood what the team's personality, individual personalities were, but I didn't understand how to overcome it except by trying to control myself. So I'll give you an example. in foresight, if you are low on ideation, there is a slew of tools you can use to promote you to develop more ideas. The thought being that the first 10 to 15 of your ideas are going to be the same old mundane ideas. But once you start getting to 20, 25 ideas, now you're thinking outside the box. And with a little twist, those ideas could be the solution to the problem that you've been vexed with for ages. There is something called brainstorming, which we all know. We all brainstorm and do little post-its, throw them up. There's something called brain writing. For the people who are introverted and don't like to speak up, they can put their ideas on paper much better. So you basically put a, 3 post-its across a 8 by 11, 9 total in a row on the page, and you just transfer those papers from one to the other. You read the top 3, and then you put 3 of your own, and those become more ideas. So I did a creative problem solving session with our fellows and attendings on some issue, and there was one fellow over there that would open her mouth to say something and then wouldn't speak. And I said, okay, now we're going to be moving from brainstorming to brain writing. She had the best ideas. She just couldn't bring herself to say it. And we could recognize, speak up, Anita, it looks like you have an idea, but then she would just back off. But when it came to writing, she wrote really good ideas down. So that's how you overcome this. Same thing with DISC. We understand that we have introverts and we have extroverts, and we have people who kind of take a backstage. Those people who take a backstage sometimes have the best ideas. They just aren't given the time to bring them forward.
That's good stuff. Brenda, you've got your hand up there, so jump on in. Thank you. Thanks, Nagma. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting research, and I appreciated it. I'm wondering, I'm a psychiatrist, and so I'm also wondering about the relationship to different fields of medicine and what potentially might cause more burnout. You found in ER docs that, or, with your group, that the more clarifying and more developing, greater emotional exhaustion. But just wondering, for those of us who, as part of what we do naturally, is trying to clarify more, if more clarification would actually be less emotional exhaustion. And if we had to just jump to implement, would that be what would cause psychiatrists to have greater emotional exhaustion?
I think that's what remains to be seen, is that the way it does pan out. I don't think, one way to think of it is there a profile of medical students that we should help them, direct them into the right profession? And that, I don't think people will take well to that, because, you can adjust, but you need to understand what is the requirement of your job. We have more or less the same personality profiles when we go into medical school. And that's okay, because you got the same curriculum to do. However, as we are determining what specialty we're going to choose, we pay very little attention to what we really enjoy. If we like longitudinal care, you're not going to get it in the emergency room. Once my patient's gone upstairs, I've forgotten about them. And then you'll see residents, and obviously we expect residents and medical students to kind of follow up on their patients, because we are trying to give them a more open-ended experience. But for me, that's not important. But we have attendings in our practice who follow those patients longitudinally for years. And I feel like those are the patients, those are the physicians that haven't adjusted to what you need to do, because I've got to forget about that death that happened the day before so I can move on to the next patient. In the moment, I feel it. Outside the moment, I've shut it off. And that's my mindset as an emergency physician. And maybe that's what's prevented me from being burnt out. I've seen a lot of tragedy, but I've marginalized it. My kids don't agree that I marginalized it, but I think I marginalized it. They said everything that happens to a teenage female, you come home and you ask us about it. So, it's different that way. But yeah, I agree with Brenda. That's the $1 million question.
Nagma, thank you. Robert, you have your hand up. Yes, Dr. Gatewood.
This is a question for both Dr. Khan and Brenda. I'm a little concerned that we use the term burnout instead of depression. And I think there may be two different entities, and there may be a fine line between the two, but one of my concerns, and I know this is just not my concern, it's there's been a lot of other people that have written about this, is that we're not getting physicians with so-called burnout to professionals like you, Brenda, who really could use your help. So I'd be interested in your comments.
I'm going to have Brenda respond to that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking a little bit. I agree that physicians don't readily seek out therapy, psychiatric help. I think the reason that there's a difference in the terminology of the two is that depression according to the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is, the psychiatrist's kind of Bible, you have to have these clinical manifestations of depression to meet the criteria of a major depressive episode. Now, people might have some depressive aspects as part of burnout, but do all of them get to the level of meeting a clinical diagnosis of depression? No. And so I think it's trying to figure out where on that continuum are physicians at much greater risk of moving on to meeting the criteria for major depression.
Fair enough. Although I look at the description of physicians that claim burnout, and it's even enough to them leave their profession. So I think it's personally, I think it's underdiagnosed. And another reason that it's underdiagnosed is that it impacts things like your medical licensure. You don't want to have to answer that question, do you have a mental illness? Because it's going to raise a red flag and it's going to cause you problems. And unfortunately, we're still living under this stigma of psychological problems. It's rampant in today's age, and yet it's still a stigma, and it's very, very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. So I think at least some of physicians that struggle with burnout could use psychological help. There's nothing to be ashamed about. It's just natural. It's just so unfortunate that this stigma continues today. And even as physicians, we may be very liberal in, starting a patient on an depressant, but when it comes to us, oh no, we don't have, we can't get depression, not us. It's kind of very unfortunate.
Totally agree. And I must say, in Ohio, they are removing the question about have you ever sought treatment, for mental illness, and moving it to more of an impairment. Have you ever needed to be psychiatrically hospitalized, things like that, instead of, have you ever? Because, even when I first got my medical license, psychiatrists during training were encouraged to seek therapy. And, you don't answer that question, honestly, on the first application to the medical license, because we said it was part of our training.
Yeah, again, it's unfortunate though. So yeah. You had to be hospitalized. You have, is it you're going to do the same thing if you're a diabetic and you got admitted for ketoacidosis.
Yep.
You know, I don't, I'm sorry. I think we've got to get over this stigma about, you know, mental illness. I know, I understand the concern, but it's, I think there's over concern about it.
Very
Robert,
much.
let's go to Ken. Ken's got his hand up there. So thanks,
Yeah,
Robert.
thank you, Roger. Dr. Khan, first let me say thank you very much for a very nice presentation. Very stimulating. One note that I made for myself was on mismatch. You mentioned mismatch at one point between the assignment and their style. You know, I think that in many professions, you know, you can see that, and it's almost like a bad breath syndrome. Everybody knows you have bad breath except for you. Could you speak maybe a little bit more about that mismatch and if there's a solution to that?
Yeah, so the person job fit theory basically states that your level of satisfaction in a job is going to be based on if there's a match between what the job demands and what your own personal aspirations and your strengths are and what your goals are in life. So, you know, you stretch it over to this level, you know, the way I think and the way I like to problem solve, because everything we're doing in our actual clinical practice is problem solving. We are problem solving disease, basically. So if there is a mismatch between the speed at which we need to problem solve, I'm thinking, that's kind of my own personal thought. I don't have studies to support the speed with which I have to problem solve and what the expectation is of the flow of my particular area, which in the ER is a very clear-cut flow. Patients arrive, we see them, position them there, they get admitted ICU or they go home. So that's my flow. And I've got to do that relatively fast because the flow continues. In a clinic model, you can actually say, I'm sorry, I can only manage 10 patients during my 8-hour session versus I am a Speedy Gonzalez. I can see 25 patients, so give me 25 patients. So you can modulate your flow and you can modulate how fast or how slow you're going to. But in environments where you don't control it, and that specifically in environments where you have hospital-based medicine is where that environment is not controlled. Private practice, you can control it. You can decide how you're going to think and you're going to do it. So less chances of you getting burnt out in private practice than when a hospital administrator is dictating how many patients you need to clear through or how many people you can hire to see the patients that are coming through, which is kind of the case for us. Is my thought, and I haven't studied and analyzed this, is our private practice colleagues less burnt out than us who are in academics and who work in an environment where our time is very controlled and the number of people we can hire to do the job is very controlled. So are we more burnt out because there are these overarching expectations on our clinical practice that we don't do? So I think that's one way of looking at it. Understanding our mindset by itself makes a big difference. So we understand our own flaws. I think that, you know, can prevent kind of the spectrum of burnout to depression, as Robert says. And it is a spectrum. Can we control it? Can early on so that people learn to cope with it and cope with it by adjusting their own expectations of their job and trying to fix their own kind of energy around the ability to get things done. We don't tell our ED physicians your expectation is that patients are going to come and are going to go. As I'm telling residents and going into fellowship to say you're choosing a profession that is heavy on days, on evenings, nights, and weekends and holidays. Are you sure you want to do this? When you think you're doing shift work, you actually are in that 8 hours. You don't even have time to eat, drink, or go to the bathroom. So is that the specialty you want to do? We don't have these discussions. So we say, you know, you're a slow thinker. You're so excited by coming up with the zebras and going through the zebras and thinking through what you do. Here, you're going to have to think on your feet. Are you making the right choice? And if they say they're making the right choice and they understand that they're going to have to think a little bit differently and implement a little differently, maybe they're going to be less burnt out. So, so my thought is we can definitely creative thinking skills can be taught. And if they can be taught, maybe they can, our challenges can be overcome, that we can let it go. I think the biggest problem for clarifiers is they can't let the problem go. They fixate on that. And that's kind of, to Michael's question, there are studies looking at DISC compared to foresight, looking at the big five compared to foresight. So they are comparing personality questionnaires with foresight to see what matches. And there is definitely good correlation between people who are extroverted, for example, with people who are high ideators. Yeah. So another study that Gerard did was looking at professions and kind of where our preferences peak in different professions. And it's not surprising that people in quality will peak in clarifying and developing. Because that's what their job is, their job entails. While people in HR will tend to be peaking in developing, probably. So different professions, different mindsets. We choose that profession because it uses our mindset. And in medicine, though, the environment for every single practice and every specialty is very different. So we need to pay attention to that. I think we need to. That's it.
Dr. Khan, fascinating. Thank you. Any other, we're about 3 minutes until the hour. Any other questions? And I just put it in the chat. We're looking at, if it works with you folks at NAGMA, if it works with you, February 16th for the next Thursday, for the next Buffalo Society for Creativity and Medical Education meeting. Great, thanks. Thumbs up on that, Michael. And then what we'll do between now and then is we'll send the link out to the recording for this, and then we'll also send out a link so you can take foresight, and Gerard will be with us. So is that date going to work for you, Dr. Khan? Great.
I will hopefully be back out of the country by then.
Okay, so we're good.
Yeah.
The 16th. Super. Okay, great. Any other comments? Robert's got a comment there, and so yes. Oh, but that was okay.
That was I was trying to put a thumbs up. Sorry.
Well, so thank you all. Any other questions, comments, reactions? Dr. Khan, thank you so much.
Oh.
This was so valuable. So
Yeah, wonderful presentation. Thank you.
yes, great. So we'll Robert, if you could stay on for just a second, I want to check in with you on something. Ken, Brenda, Michael, always great to see you. And NAGMA, thank you so much. We'll get Gerard loop on this. We'll send the link to the recording out to you folks. Share it, invite as many folks as you like, and let's keep the word out and going on that. So thank you all so much for being here. So take care, everybody.
Roger,
I'm glad we were thinking alike, Mike.
Roger, too. Michael asked about the correlation between DISC and foresight. Okay, so I put, and NAGMA even mentioned that there was research. So in the chat, I put the article.
Oh, thank you,
I
David.
put their research. Dr. Puccio was one of the researchers for that correlation. So,
David, I'm not seeing that. Did you maybe just send it to one person?
well, it says everyone, but let me try to send it again.
Oh, there it is.
There it
There
is.
it is.
Okay.
It just came through.
Yeah.
All right.
David, you rock, man. You rock, man. You rock. So, all right. So thank you, everyone. So have a great rest of the day. And Robert, let's just check and do a little quick check-in. So see you all on the 16th of February. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, have a good morning, everyone.
Thanks. How are you feeling, Dr. Gatewood?
Well, it's been a pretty